In this tutorial, we'll look at displaying textures in AccuTrans 3D. The first thing we will do is reset AccuTrans so that it would be the same as if you had just installed AccuTrans for the first time. So we'll shut down AccuTrans first. Then we will open Windows File Explorer. I already have it open, but to open it you press the Windows key followed by the E key. Then I go to the folder where you have AccuTrans installed, and I have it on my S drive in an AccuTrans 3D folder, and there is a file with the PREFS file extension on it. Click on that and right click and delete the file. Okay, AccuTrans will start up now in its default condition. So I'll start up AccuTrans by double clicking on it, and we'll just say yes, we'll agree to the terms, we'll say OK, and this talks about the help file, and we'll say OK. And now I'll just have to take and move my resize my window back to the size of the capture screen. Okay, so we have AccuTrans running. Now I'm going to load an object with textures on, and for that I will use the a model that comes with in the Avatar tutorial. So going back to File Explorer, I'll open up the folder, go down to the textmap.cob file, click on it, hold the mouse button down and drag it and drop it on AccuTrans, and the file loads, and here we have a file with textures on, and this is the status line down here. And if I move the cursor over the different layers, I get information about the layer on the status line, and when I move to where a texture is, I also get the texture name. If there are UV coordinates and no file name, then it will say no file assigned, and so we have the different textures on. So now if I go up here and I look at the menus, on the file menu there's nothing to concern us. On the prefs menu there is nothing to deal with textures. The work area, I'm working in the first work area. On layers it will look like that. On viewer, for the use OpenGL is checked because by default we use the OpenGL viewer, and that is the only viewer that displays textures. An older software viewer won't display textures. Down here we are set to light both sides of the model, and and rendering one side of the model is turned off. And I'll come back to this in a minute. And then we come down here to use textures. We have to have that checked. Use default texture can be on or off. Use texture mode GL replace can be on or off. Use color white with textures can be on or off. And if you are unless you are working with meshes to use in active worlds, you don't have to worry about these settings down here. Going up to camera, there's nothing that affects the textures. If we go to the display, textures show up when we are in one of these 4 shading modes. If you have edge display turned on either one of these two, and your model is very high in polygon count, and you are zoomed out on the model, you probably won't see any textures or colors on your model except for the color of the edges until you zoom in quite a bit on your model. This just lets us show different sides of the model. Clipboard doesn't concern us, and there's nothing here that affects the textures. We could get rid of we could erase textures on all layers, but that's not what we're after. So now we've got textures here. Now if I wanted to save this out to another file format, I can just go to File. Save with Options has all the settings that I need to make. And if I wanted to go to a collada file for output, I just select collada, and in this area we just changed from the group of flags we saw before. These flags always change and only show what works with the particular file format, and various settings that apply to different models. They're global. So for instance, Avatar is on several different file formats, so that's a global setting. Now for textures to be output, we have to have UV selected, and by default texture path is on, which means the full texture path would be saved to the file. And if we clicked on partial, then only a relative texture path would be written out. Now we don't have to do either of those two. For this exercise I'm going to copy textures, and so no texture path at all will be written to the file, just the file name. And to the file where I save the mesh, the textures will be sent out, and I have by choice to not overwrite files, overwrite and what format I want to save it to. Save it to the same format, which is just a straight copy, or I can convert it to a BMP, a JPEG, or a PNG. So I'm going to say over here I can set whether I want the model scaled. And depending on what file format you choose, there can be other page tabs that appear here. So I'm going to say Save. It comes up and you can see that I'm in the Avatar tutorial, so I'm just going to back up into the AccuTrans folder, and I'm going to save the model there. And it says textmap.daa. Well, I'm going to just change that, and I'm just going to put a night on the front of it, so we got a slightly different name, and say Save. Now if I bring up the where I copied the file out, and I just back up into the AccuTrans folder, you can see now I have night.textmap.dae, which wasn't in the file before, and now I have the JPEG files that were copied over. So now I just go back to AccuTrans, and I'm going to close the window down, and that close also clears out my work, so I've got nothing in there. I'm going to go back to the AccuTrans folder, click on the DAE file, drag it up, drop it, bring it up, and there's our textmap our textured files. So we created a new file and copied the textures over. Now there are I said I would talk about light both sides and render one side. If I turn off and just light one side, it lights the visible side of the model, and if I render one side, it again just renders the one side of the model, and you can see our textures are still displayed. Now I'm going to go up to here, Layers, and open the Adjust Lights and Materials dialog box and drag it into the recording area. Now by default there is one OpenGL light turned on, directional light, and there are 8 that can be selected, and this shows where directional light was selected, the first light, and we see its properties down here. If I click on global, I just have a little bit of ambient light turned on as a global light. And now if I go back and look at the first light, if we check ambient, ambient is totally black. If I check specular, it's black also. and if I click on diffuse, it's fully white. So we're lighting the object, and here with these controls we can change the position of the light, and this is the position it's in now. So if I go to the other page tab, I click it, the settings here is we can change various colors for different properties that affect the OpenGL viewer, with the first one being the background. Now if we go over to the layers, we can select each one of the different layers and see what properties are on them. Now we're down on right leg lower one. This is an avatar for Active Worlds, and it's non-textured, so we don't see any names or UV in red on this layer. But if I go, I can also select the layer by positioning the cursor over the layer in the view window and clicking with the right mouse button, and now we switch to the torso layer. UV appears, and saying that there are UV coordinates on the layer, and this is the layer that's on. And if I opened up another work area, and if I go back here to File, Open As, go down to TrueSpace, this acts as a recent file list, so it's going to open up the last TrueFace file I had, which was the textmap.cob file from the Avatar tutorial folder. So I click Open. Okay, so now if I again open up the Lights and Materials dialog box, right click on the torso layer, okay, you can see that here the texture is in the avatar one, so we did make the change. So now I'm going to go back to the first work area, open it up again, go back to the layers, and okay, we're just in the AccuTrans folder. And now if I wanted to check the other properties on material properties, I can just go down here and click the buttons, and these are the defaults. Now I'm going to close this down, and I'm going to go over and click on Create UV, which opens up simple controls for creating UV coordinates. And I could have done this also over in the where we were, but we're going to click right click on the torso, and oops, okay, we're on the torso. Okay, so now if I wanted to erase the name, okay, there's nothing applied there, and now you can see this funny looking shape back here. This is the default texture that gets shown when AccuTrans can't find the texture that's supposed to be displayed, or it can't display the type of texture that was applied to the layer. And if I bring up this is what that texture looks like. So when it gets cut into lots of different shapes to be applied to the model, your model can look quite funny with the default texture on it. And if I go back up here to Viewer and uncheck Use Default Texture, okay, we can see that the color on the layer here is white, and because I saved it out with white base changing it. And if we went over here to the other layer, select this one, open up the dialog box, right click to get where we want to go, and this time if I erase it, this one's got a red color underneath it. And so then we'll just go okay, and I'll just reload that model back in. Okay, now we know there's a red underneath, a color underneath, so if I go to Viewer and I use turn off Use Color White with Textures, some programs blend in the color of the layer with the texture, and so you get a different color, and some of them do not do that. So to get that same effect, you have to tell the OpenGL viewer that you want to use color white with the textures. And so that's all you should have to do, and you should have textures displaying on the model. That's it for this tutorial. Goodbye.